Hello there, I am Scorched Scales, and welcome to my first big proper video. There probably isn't that many of you watching, since this is my first big proper video. Eh? Hold on a second. Let me take this. Hello? What do you mean it blew up? It's a video. It doesn't have a physical form. It can't blow up like it's in a bloody Michael Bay movie. Oh, you mean statistically? Ah, come on, it can't be that. It can't be that much. Just, oh. That's quite a big number. Alright, so, around 2 months ago at this point, I started reading Rings of Fire. I'll fully admit, I'm still new to this, if you couldn't tell by the title of the video. For a couple of years now at this point, I've been interested in Wings of Fire. I've been interested in the world and the story of Wings of Fire. But it was around 2 months ago where I decided to finally bite the bullet and read Wings of Fire, because you know, they're books they're supposed to be read. But I'll fully admit, I was already aware of what happened through books 1 to 4, because the main way I was exposed to the world of Wings of Fire and how I experienced the stories was through the dubs of the graphic novels, and I may have just started reading the books because I got impatient and I didn't want to wait to find out what happened in book 5. And you know what? I'm still excited for the 5th graphic novel dub, but I do not regret a thing. So, on to the actual purpose of this video. Around, 3 weeks ago at this point, I think, I was like, you know what would be an interesting idea? What if I documented my thoughts on the books as I went through them? Because whenever I come across a content creator for Wings of Fire, as they probably should have, they've read all the books, because why would you make a channel surrounding something if you haven't absorbed all the material of it? I definitely wouldn't do something that stupid. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if I sat down and I catalogued my thoughts on the books as I went through them, to see how my thoughts change over time, to see how my perception of certain characters change, because I just think that would be interesting. But by the time I had this idea, I had already read the entirety of Arc 1. And also, I just want to express here, every single thing said here is my own opinion, and I am relatively new at this, so go easy on me, please. Full spoilers here. I don't know why you're really watching this video if you haven't experienced the books, but full-on spoilers here for Arc 1. If you're here for a recommendation, yes, read it. I really like it. I wouldn't be here centering a channel around it if I didn't really like it. And also, for the visuals on the screen, I am going to be drawing something. But, I am not a good artist. The last thing I drew was this. So yeah, don't expect any good artwork from this, and let's just hope my commentary is good, because if not, this video is gonna blow!
I'm going to fucking come.
Okay, alright, so for book 1, the Dragonet Prophecy. This, for me, is the baseline of what this series is. This one, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. This is the middle. But since we are at the beginning, I should probably talk about the beginning, the prologue. I think the prologue was like the perfect opening for this series. This book series begins with the death of a child and an adult. After I finished the prologue, I was like, what am I reading? What am I reading? I was just in like disbelief of what you can get away with in books. Especially since these books are aimed towards a younger audience. But like, I mainly come from the landscape of film. And like, you couldn't do a lot of stuff like this in a movie. It has a little glimmer of violence in there. I like that a lot. But something that I did notice is that the openings of the graphic novels is different from the books. Because the opening of the graphic novel is the hatching of the eggs, primarily Clay's, which is good because that goes on to further sets up Clay's arc throughout the story. But the opening of the book goes out of its way to show the setting of the story, and it sets the tone perfectly for the rest of the series. Now, if I had to choose between the two, I do personally prefer the opening of the books, but like the dream opening would be to combine the two. Because without one, you don't really have the other, and like, I would prefer to have both of them, please. Now, for the overall story of the first book, the whole thing felt nearly perfectly paced to me. Because like, to me at least, the first part didn't feel too long, didn't feel too short at all. Although, I did enjoy part 1 a lot less than I did part 2, because I loved part 2. Now, I did like part 3, but to me, it doesn't really feel like it needed to be like a full part. I think that could have very easily have been squished down a bit. But if you did do that, you would lose quite a few good interactions between the group. So if I did have to choose like a part that I enjoyed the most, it would definitely be part 2, because to me, part 2 felt like that was the center of the story. Now, as for Clay, I like Clay. I really like this POV. And I especially really enjoyed his arc throughout the story, where like, he's starting to question, am I a monster? Am I doomed to live this life? Am I destined to become like everybody else around me? Now, something that I noticed is that Clay's arc directly parallels that of Peril. They have nearly the exact same arc, just told a bit differently. I will admit, due to the changing in perspectives, Clay's character going forward doesn't really do that much. Because, like, he goes through his whole arc in this book. And, like, in the books going forward, he just becomes hunger. He just craves food. Food is his only meaning in life. I have become hunger, the destroyer of food. And while on about Peril, she is probably my favorite character in the entire series. I just think she's neat. And I also find her character weirdly adorable, which is like, that's kind of weird. Like, my mind doesn't find Sunny cute, like, yeah, the little squeaky adorable Sandwing. My brain's like, nah, I don't find that cute. Meanwhile, the big murderous burning Skywing, yes, I find you cute. I like your character. And I love how, with Peril, you have like this implied story that's going on off screen. Because after Peril finds out Scarlet's been lying to her, and that her mother is still alive. The scene where Clay's walking to Scarlet's Sky Room, I think it was, and he comes across the burnt ashes of one of Scarlet's paintings right outside of Peril's room. My mind is like, ooh, there's a story that happened there. That was the obvious turning point in Peril's arc, even though she does relapse a bit. I will say one of my bigger critiques with this book is actually a small detail, but it was Clay's aunt, the Mudwing who brought his egg to the Talents of Peace, and she died. To my memory, she isn't mentioned anywhere beyond part 3. Like, she's introduced in the same moment where she's mentioned. Like, I do think it kind of would have been nice if you, like, kind of drop it throughout the story that, ooh, there was this other Mudwing who was meant to look after them, who died. Like, small details like that kind of come out of nowhere. And there is one other big, more significant example of that happening in a later book, which I will mention when we get there. And I don't really have much else to say about book 1, other than the part where Clay meets Cattail, I think her name was? Clay's mother. Due to my first exposure to the story, to the characters, being through the graphic novel dubs, I wasn't overly that fond of Clay's mother, because in the graphic novel, the voice actor does do a good job, but she has like this kind of like villainous, not very nice sounding voice. But when I read books, I listen to the audiobook as well, because my reading comprehension is horrendous. And when she appeared, the narrator didn't villainize her. She just gave the character a normal voice. She sounded strangely innocent. She sounded like a normal person. Which kind of like recontextualized the whole character to me. Because before, I saw her as like, oh, you're the evil mother, how dare you. But just due to the change in her voice, my mind went, oh, she isn't evil. This is just a normal part of her life. This is a normal part of her culture. Which, well, yes, that is disappointing for Clay because he was hoping to find a supportive mother. But I don't see her as evil. It's just how she is. So yeah, that was my mad ramblings about book 1. It be good.
Under the sea. Under the sea.
Alright, so the Lost Heir. I may get executed for this one. This is my least favourite out of Arc 1. I would like to emphasize, this is still good. This is like a 7 out of 10 to me. But like, I just didn't really enjoy this one as much as the others. Like, for a fair bit of this book, to me, it really felt like nothing was happening. Like, it was really around the scene where they enter the hatchery for the first time. That's where I really think the book started, like, picking up the pace and actually doing something. Like, yeah, I understand how that ends up happening because, ooh, big new place, big new kingdom, lots of new characters, and you need to take a lot of time to establish them all. But I don't really know if you would classify this as a critique of the book, or something that I had going into it. Because before reading this book, I've heard people describe it as like, ooh, it's like a murder mystery. But then I read it, and this doesn't really function like a murder mystery. Like, the only suspects that Tsunami really acts upon is Shock and his daughter. But beyond that, whenever a possible murderer is mentioned, she basically, like, just knocks it down and says, no, it's not them. Because throughout a murder mystery story, there's multiple suspects, and throughout the story, you have the main character, normally an inspector, basically interrogate these lot, try and find out clues, and find out who did it. But in this, it doesn't really do that, because they never talk to anybody about it. Which, well, yes, that probably makes sense in the universe. But I don't really think it's a fair comparison comparing this to a murder mystery, in my opinion. Now, once again, in my opinion, the book has the better opening than the one of the graphic novel. Because in the opening of the book, you have Webs basically talking to the Talons of Peace. The Talons of Peace try to kill him, and then this nice Mudwing called Crocodile steps in and lets him escape. But then it turns out to be, oh no, it's a trap! As Crocodile is secretly a spy for the Skywings, Blazers Army, yeah, they're all the same. Like, well, yes, that isn't really the best, but it's something. But meanwhile, in the graphic novel, it opens with Starflight telling Tsunami about the story of the Lost Princess, which does set up Tsunami's arc throughout the story, because that is like a very important part to her. It's just that when the Crocodile appears in the graphic novel, it means nothing. Like, oh, there's a random Mudwing. Why are they saying all this? I don't know who you are. Like when I experienced the graphic novels for the first time, and Crocodile appeared, I was like, who's this? Did I skip something? Am I stupid? Did I just forget a scene? Because the graphic novel doesn't set up that character at all. But in reality, the character of Crocodile isn't important at all. But also, while yes, I did already know that Tsunami killed Gil, even when I was reading the books, I was like, oh no, oh no! Like, I already knew what was going to happen. I already knew the twist. But nevertheless, it still affected me. There were quite a few moments like that, because even though I already knew that the statue was the killer, in the book, the fight scene was still really intense. Like, I knew exactly what was going to happen, but I was still invested, I was still engaged, like I didn't know. If that isn't the sign of a well-written story, I don't know what is. But to be fully honest, I don't really have much to say about Tsunami as a character, so I'm gonna talk about the side characters for a bit. Now, Queen Coral. At first, I was like, she ain't that bad, she's fine. But then she murders a god. The scene where she flies out of the hatchery and kills a god just because they weren't really there when the egg got destroyed. Once again, that was one of the moments where I went, oh, I didn't know you were allowed to do this. Because Queen Coral basically tears this guard in half, and they put them on display outside of the hatchery, I think? At that very moment, I was like, oh, I'm scared of you now! And also, while on about the guards, Shark, what was his big deal? He was scrumming around, like, acting all villainous, like, standing there, staring at people. But, like, he turned out to just be, like, chill at the end. Well, not really chill, but he wasn't responsible for anything. Like, what was his deal? And, like, due to the way the books described him, the way I imagined him in my head is that he was like a stork, just standing there, with his eyes wide open, not blinking, just staring intensely at everything around him.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Thinking about it, it all could probably be like, turned down to, oh, he was just trying to protect his home. Due to him chaining up Clay, who is a Mudwing, who is a enemy of the Seawings. Then there's also Riptide. I'll be fully honest, I never really got a impression from Riptide. Like, when I think of most characters, I can turn them down to, oh, you are like this. But like, with Riptide, I don't really have anything to define him by. Sorry to anybody out there who likes Riptide. This may change when I read the book again. But to me, a blank canvas had more personality than Riptide. I just never really got a distinct impression of him. I was like, oh yeah, he's kind. He has a backstory. I did like him. It's just he's fair in my opinion. He's just fair. But if my memory serves me right, he is responsible for what is quite possibly my favourite line in the entire series so far. And it's from Glory. And this single line is probably what made Glory my favourite Dragonet of Destiny. But Glory made a joke when Tsunami walked in with Orklet, I believe the hatchling ended up being called in the egg. And she basically implied that, oh, the egg is yours? You've been really busy? And I remember howling. I never expected to, laugh that loud at a book. And then as for Anemone, she is a well-defined character, but I don't really have that much to say about her. Other than, yeah, she's there, I like her, and I am aware that she does come back in Arc 2, so I'm very intrigued to see how this character changes, how much will this life affect her in the future? Will the sudden appearance of Orklet change anything? I'm very curious of how her character is going to change. And also, isn't it mentioned that Queen Coral has 36 sons? What? 36? Who's raising all these Dragonets? Who's raising them? What are all their names? Do you think Queen Coral eventually just gave up and just started repeating names yes, you are Rock, you are Tidepool, you are Tidepool 2, I'm calling you Blobfish because you're dead ugly. Who's raising all these kids? I know it ain't Gil. Gil's dead. But then that only leaves the last character to really talk about. Whirlpool. Whirlpool. I find Whirlpool to be a really cool name. Ooh, this is Whirlpool. Ooh, I wonder what kind of character Whirlpool has. And then he turns out to be a nonce. But I will admit that his death was very shocking. But yeah, despite me having a fair few critiques with this book, I just want to say, it isn't bad. I don't think it's bad at all. There is a lot of good in this book. Even though, yes, for me personally, this is at the bottom for Arc 1, for me personally. I have no idea how unpopular of a opinion that is. Just don't crucify me, please.
For the love of God!
Secret tunnel! Secret tunnel!
Alright, now we are on to what I believe is the fan favourite from Arc 1, which is The Hidden Kingdom. Now, this one is my favourite out of the 3 that we have discussed so far. It's just that, in my opinion, the books get better from here. Well, yes, I did really enjoy this. This is a solid 8 for me. And like, even the next one is a solid 8. It's just that there are certain problems with this book that bring it below the dark secret for me. I have 2 main problems in particular, but within the actual story they are quite small, but for me they have like quite a big effect. The main one is when Glory gets captured and gets taken to the Nightwing kingdom. Now, in the book, she's only there for like a chapter or 2, which, yeah, makes sense, Glory's a fucking badass. But like, really? She broke out that quickly? Like, I personally would have preferred if she was forced to stay there for like another day or 2, and she was forced to live through the same conditions that the other Rainwing prisoners are going through, to further emphasize why she needs to stand against the Rainwing queens. While yes, the book still gets that point across with what we have, it's just that I personally would have preferred if we had more time there. And then there's the main problem of the book to me. To my memory, the whole book is emphasizing how Glory will not let things outside of her control define her. She doesn't care that she's not in the prophecy. She doesn't care that she's a Rainwing. She is going to complete her goals and prove herself. Not because of somebody else, not because of what she is, but because of who she is. But in the end, she ends up winning because she just so happens to be related to the previous queen. I'll fully admit, I'm not a big fan of that. Like, to me personally, that kind of downplays the whole story of the book. The only reason she wins is because of what she is, rather than who she is. But besides those 2 main issues, the rest of the book is great. I loved seeing the Rainwing Kingdom. I loved hearing about how the Rainwing Kingdom works, what it looks like. I created some very bright and colourful images in my head of what was described. Okay, so, I'll really jump straight to the characters. Like, of course, there's Glory. She's great, her arc is great, but a little part of me is kind of disappointed that, to me at least, she did lose a bit of a comedy factor. Because in the previous books, I could always rely on Glory to make me laugh, because she always had those sarcastic comebacks. But to my memory, nothing in this book really made me laugh. But that does make sense, because if you have a character like Quip every single page, it will get really annoying very quickly. Although, it probably wouldn't annoy me, because I like laughing. So yeah, Glory is very clearly like the standout character here. But every other side character here kind of doesn't stand out as much to me. Like, the main standout side character here to me was Deathbringer. I like Deathbringer. Although, I'll be fully honest, I wasn't that big of a fan of him at first. Because I was aware that, like, oh, this guy is like the kind of love interest for Glory. And he only appears like 3 times in the book for a relatively short time, and when he disappeared, I was like, really? That was it? But then he does continue to appear in the other 2 books, which is where I really started to like Deathbringer and like his dynamic with Glory. To be fully honest, I think over time, Deathbringer has kind of become one of my favorite characters in the series. Like, he isn't my favorite, Peril is still my favorite, nor is he my second favorite. That character gets introduced later, but he might be my third. Like, he's the kind of character, whenever he appears, I just get the biggest smile on my face. Like, and I can't really explain why. It's just, I like him. I think he's neat. Although, I have seen people describe him as the comedic relief, but like, in Arc 1, he isn't. Like, in Arc 1, he barely cracks any jokes, if he does crack any. But who knows, maybe that's what he becomes in Arc 2, in which in that case, if he does become the comedic relief, there's a very good chance he might become my third favourite character. And the only other standout characters to me here were Kinkajou, Tamarin, and Jambo. Yes, Jambo. Wait, is it Jambo or Jambu? Yes, it's Jambu, because he's named after a fruit, and the fruit is the same exact colour as him. As for Kinkajou, I don't really have much to say about her here. Like, yeah, she's a cool, tough kid. That's really all I have to say about her. And then there's Jambu. Once again, like the other characters, he doesn't really feel that defined to me, but that might just be my memory failing me. Like, yeah, he was there. He was good. But once again, all of this could very easily change on like a reread of it. And then there's Tamarin, I believe. The blind Rainwing. Well, yes, she does get introduced kind of out of nowhere. I liked her. I really like how Tui kind of twisted that, oh, this challenge very much relies on sight, because ooh, bright, colourful flowers. But the dragon they have compete is blind. And I really like how she overcomes this challenge by using her other senses, like smell. While yes, that is rather simplistic, it works very well. I hope we see more of her. So yeah, strangely enough, that's really all I have to say to my memory. Like, this feels kind of mean because I really liked this book, but like, I feel like I spent most of the time complaining. I don't know. This and The Lost Heir are probably the ones that I need to reread the most. But as for the Hidden Kingdom, I clearly need to reread it just so I can remember what happened.
My main goal is to blow up and then act like I don't know nobody.
Alright, so, The Dark Secret. Now, despite this being my second highest rated one on my ranking, I think this might be the book I have the least to say about. It's just that, personally, I don't really have that many critiques with this book. Like for most of the other books, there is this one main problem I can point at and say, okay, I don't like this about it. This I think it could be improved on. I don't really have that for this book. Because, theoretically, this book would fall under the same problem as Book 2 did, where for most of the book it is just wandering around. But in this situation, I don't mind it, because I found myself being more intrigued with the Nightwing Kingdom than I did for the Seawing Kingdom. Because due to this being a secret island, and due to us not really seeing that many Nightwings before, it has this aura of mysticism around it. That intrigues me more than the Seawing Kingdom did. And also, yes, I was partway through reading this book where I realized, oh, they're living on an island in the middle of nowhere, their weather is horrible, they hate everybody. Yeah, halfway through this book, I realized they were British. Which I have heard Tui say is unintentional. But even if it isn't intentional, it's a very funny coincidence then. Now, just like the others, yes, I did like Starflight's perspective, but Starflight's perspective wasn't really that memorable to me. It wasn't like Sunny's, which changed the way that I viewed the character. Starflight thinks the same exact way that I thought Starflight would think. I really like how, at the end of it, Starflight does get blinded. I like how he has to live with consequences of his actions. I like it when protagonists have to face the consequences of their actions. Either it be events unfolding throughout the story, them personally being affected by it, or them being hurt by it, in which Starflight does in this case where he does become blind. Now, as for the other characters, Marussia is just more of what I expected. He is big, grumpy man. And I'll fully admit, at first, I wasn't the biggest fan of Marussia dying at the end of this book. But this was before I read The Brightest Night. Because at the end of this book, I was like, really? They've killed off the closest thing this book series has to a physical villain? Like, at the time, I was very concerned about how this was going to unfold. But I actually like how this series deals with that. And the other significant new character that comes to mind to me is Fate Speaker, who, yes, they are basically just Sunny 2.0, Sunny in the body of a Nightwing, so Starflight can overcome his obsession with Sunny. But once again, I think this is a situation where I kind of preferred Fate Speaker over Book 1 to 4's view on Sunny, and I really like her, little occasional romantic interactions with Starflight. I think they're very cute together. But the main feature of Fate Speaker is that, apparently she can see visions of the future. It is kinda retconned in the next book that, she doesn't and she's lying. But I don't believe that. Because since Fate Speaker wasn't born on the Nightwing Island, and due to the cloudy sky, that's presumably why none of the Nightwings on the island have any powers. So, due to Fate Speaker presumably not being born on the Nightwing Island, she was probably born in a normal place under the moon. So this might be heading it into headcanon territories. But I like to imagine that Fate Speaker does have very weak future-seeing powers. But she can't tell the difference between her imagination and what she fears is going to happen and her visions, to where these three things just come together, get clumped together into one big mess, where she can't really tell the difference between them. I don't know, I just like to imagine that Fate Speaker isn't lying because she kind of seems too innocent for that. And as for the backup Dragonet of Destiny, the only ones who I really have anything to say on is it Squid? Yeah, I think it's Squid. And Flame. I believe the Skywing was called Flame. Like, Flame, he's, how do you describe Flame in one word? I don't really think you can describe Flame in one word, because you can think of many different things to call him. But then there's Squid. I've seen people describe him as annoying, but I just felt sorry for the guy. Like, he just wanted to go home. He was scared most of the time. I just ended up feeling sorry for this guy. There's Mastermind, Starflight's father. He seems like a man who's too preoccupied with his work to realize what he is doing. Like, yes, I see that he's just following orders, but basically torturing these poor Rainwings to where I don't even think he recognized the color of happiness. Like, yeah, I'm very curious about what's gonna happen to him. And I don't know why, but like, as soon as he talked, my mind immediately heard him as Peter Capaldi. Yeah, I don't know why. There's also Fierce Teeth, I believe she is called. Starflight's half-sister? There isn't that much to say about her. She is just really mean. And the only other character that I can think of is Queen Battle Winner. She dies? Which, ends up being another thing that the British have in common with the Nightwings, both having dead queens. And that ending, where it's revealed that the prophecy was all made up. It isn't real. It was a work of fiction by Marussia. Like, damn! The whole purpose of their lives is not real. Finally, something I can relate to. And of course, this has a big impact on Sunny and her story in the next book, especially since Sunny was the most centered on the whole prophecy thing. And also, I just love how this book basically says that Nightwings are basically just massive Komodo dragons. So like now, whenever I picture a Nightwing, I just see them with the big lips of the Komodo dragon. The big kissable lips of the Komodo dragon.
Gone. Reduced to atoms.
And now here we are, on the final book of Arc 1. Well, technically the final book, because there's still the winglets, which I did read, but I'm not going to talk about them here, because then we really will be here all day. But this is where I step in and say, once again, I don't know how popular of a opinion this is, due to me still being relatively new here, but this is my favourite book from Arc 1. I love this as a conclusion. I love the characters. I love how the story plays out. But there is one big problem that like holds the whole thing back for me. And that is the Eye of Onyx. Remember when I mentioned earlier about there being like things that kind of appear out of nowhere? That happened here with the Eye of Onyx. Now, I could be completely wrong here, but I think this book is the first time that the Eye of Onyx is ever mentioned. I had no memory of the Eye of Onyx before this book starting, and even by the end of it, I had no idea what the Eye of Onyx would do. I didn't really know what the purpose of it was, because it kind of feels like it came in out of nowhere. This will probably be where I rely on you lot to correct me, because I very easily could have just forgotten about any mention of it. But whatever mention there was, it was small. And if the Eye of Onyx was present and mentioned throughout the previous books, I do think it should have been emphasized a lot more. But besides that, I love everything else in this book. Like, Sunny. I don't know if this happens with anybody else, but Sunny's POV changes how I view her as a character. Because before this book, I was like, oh yeah, it's Sunny, the small, cute one. And like, that's the same way the characters in the story viewed her. Even though there are times in the previous books where Sunny tries to say something and everybody either A, ignores her, or somebody else repeats their idea, but louder. Here, it fundamentally changed how I kind of view Sunny as a character. Because in this book, it shows that, yeah, Sunny isn't happy all the time. She does consider the darker situations. She does think about how the bad things can happen. But, at the end of the day, the conclusions she comes to is usually the more positive one, which is the one that she ends up expressing, which leads to everybody believing that, oh, she only says all the positive stuff, so therefore she mustn't think about all this darker stuff that can happen. But in reality, she does, but either A, nobody is listening to her, or it never leaves her mouth because she doesn't think it's the right thing to do. Like, wow! That is such an upgrade than being the cute, innocent one. And oh, I loved every beat within this story. Like, I was intrigued about the beginning, like, ooh, Sunny's been kidnapped, then, ooh, She's choosing to follow them so she can prove herself to the other Dragonettes. And then, the Scorpion Den, which is the coolest place in the entire world. And then meeting Fawn. I can't believe I'm saying this, but a actual good parental figure in this series? Impossible! I've got more to say about Fawn when I talk about the characters, but I love Fawn. She's so cool. And initially, I didn't think I would be that big of a fan of Sunny being taken to Byrne's tower, but in reality, I kind of loved it. Seeing Queen Scarlet again, that was great. That was thrilling. And then, not only does Fawn come and basically attack the tower, but Peril appears too? Now, I'll fully admit, I already had Fawn becoming the queen spoiled for me. But I had zero clue Peril was going to appear in this book. When she appeared, I was basically that. I was the Soy Jack meme. I was the guy with his mouth wide open, just pointing. Like, I couldn't believe what I was reading. I loved it. And then Peril talks to Scarlet, and then I realized the relationship between Peril and Scarlet is basically the stand-in for, like, a abusive relationship. Like, oh, I feel so sorry for Peril. She had nowhere else to go, so she turned back to her abuser. And after Scarlet says he will never love you, and Peril runs out of the tower and cries. At that very moment, I wanted to give her a hug. I wanted to give her a hug and say, hey, everything's gonna be alright. But then I remembered, A, this is a fictional character. B, this is a dragon. And C, my flesh would start melting. Well, the only part of the book that I didn't really enjoy was Sunny interacting with the scavengers. Now, I am not against the scavengers. I'm aware some people are. I am completely fine with them. I liked Flower, I believe her name was. It's just that the scene where she was talking to the scavengers didn't really feel like it was necessary. Like, yeah, she needed to get the Dream Visitor from them so she could communicate across the island and coordinate the end. But she could have took Scarlet's Dream Visitor, because Scarlet had a Dream Visitor. Why not just cut this scene and have Sunny basically take Scarlet's, and then we have more time to do other stuff? And Sunny encountering Stone Mover, who's basically the exact opposite of her, where Sunny is seen as the bright, optimistic member of the group. Stone Mover is a rock. Stone Mover became stone. He got stoned. He's high 24/7. But I adored this ending. I love how Byrne basically enters with this big, brutish intro, and she dies because of a small snake. Like the three Sandwing sisters, they basically represent three different things, which is strength, intelligence, and beauty. Byrne was the only reason why Blister didn't become queen immediately. So, like, yeah, Blister saw Byrne as the main threat and used her intelligence to take Byrne out immediately. Some people may see that as a disappointment, as they might have wanted to see more of Byrne and see, like, a actual conflict between them. But I like how she ended. I like it. And that description of how she died was just horrific. And then, you have the Dragon Bite Viper, I believe it was called, biting Clay as he jumps in the way to take the shot for Sunny, I believe it was. Like, oh, my heart sank. I was pretty sure Clay was going to live, but I wasn't sure. Like, I was legitimately worried that we were going to get the same horrifying death we did with Burn, but you switched Burn's name with Clay. But then, Peril comes in out of nowhere, and I nearly screamed, I tell you. And she starts to cut the flesh where the snake bit. And I tell ya, the description wasn't pretty. But then once again, we do have the whole Ivonix thing, and I would have preferred if this was foreshadowed a lot more. But it does its job, and it leads to Ballista dissolving into dust. Out of all the ways I imagined Ballista to go, I'll tell ya, that wasn't one of them. But yeah, Fawn does get crowned queen, and despite me having that spoiled for me, I'll fully admit, I forgot until the very page before she got crowned as queen. I'm like, yeah, she deserves it. But as for the epilogue, I will admit I am kind of disappointed that we didn't get to see the interaction between Fawn and Stone Mover. Well, yes, it wouldn't really make sense, because why would Sunny want to see that? But like, I wanted to see that. In general, I just want to see how their relationship started off in general. Like, I want to see how that was. I want to see how that turned out. I want to see how that affected both of them as characters. So yeah, I won't lie, I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get to see that. So yeah, that was basically my abridged rundown of what's happened throughout the entire book. If you can't tell, I loved the book. Now, on to the side characters. Fawn. I love Fawn. She is so cool. The first thing she does is kill a Nightwing. And then upon hearing that Sunny's being captured, instead of cowering and hoping she returns soon, she storms the palace. What a fucking badass. Like, I love the Scorpion Den. I love Fawn. Fawn is my second favorite character. And a character that has a small amount of page time, but leaves an impact on me, is Six Claws. While, yes, he is a more prominent side character, it's like, he's less prominent than the likes of Fawn. Like, yeah, I liked him. Finally, a father in this book series who isn't terrible. Now, the only other characters I have to mention is Smolder, I believe his name was. It was the sibling to the Sandwing princesses who serves Burn. Now, I'll fully admit, I was expecting Burn's servant. Well, not servant, because he isn't a servant. What was he? I don't know. I was expecting Smolder to be like, oh, this big, gruff guy. But he isn't. He wasn't what I was expecting. Like, he has a pet scavenger? He's a decent guy? He lets Sunny fly around? At the end of the day, I felt sorry for him. Like, he's just this poor guy being pushed around. Because he doesn't have a backbone. But I would have liked it at the end. Like, if he stood up to, like, his sisters one last time. But he really doesn't, and he's like, he just, like, stands on the sidelines, which makes sense. But I would have preferred if his character, like, stood up to his sisters one time before they died. And the only other character I have to mention is Kibble, because I know that he's a protagonist in Arc 2. I'm like, really? Kibble? Like, he only has 3 lines here. Really? This guy's gonna be a protagonist? So yeah, that was the Brightest night. I love the Brightest Night. It's my favorite so far. It's my favorite out of Arc 1. I will admit, my biggest disappointment with this book is how we didn't get to see anything in the rainforest. Like, how did the interactions with the Nightwings and the Rainwings go? What were those 5 assassination attempts that Deathbringer stopped? How did Starflight act when he woke up and realized he was blind? How did he come to terms with that? How did everybody react when Sunny went missing? I wish we saw that, but due to how the books work, we had to follow Sunny's point of view. Which, well, yeah, I do find it kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see it. I fully understand why we didn't, and I'm still very happy with what we got. So yes, those were my very long, unabridged thoughts on Arc 1. And yes, if you couldn't tell, I loved it. I will fully admit, I don't read books that often, if at all. Like, if you told me earlier this year that, ooh, I would be interested in a book series, and I would eventually start making a small channel about it, I probably would have thought you were mentally insane. I just really wish I had this book series when I was growing up. I wish I had these characters when I was younger. I wish I would have had the chance to look up to these characters growing up. Because these are published by Scholastic. And I guarantee they would have been at my school's Scholastic school fairs. And I just never read them. Well, I don't really blame young me for not reading them. Because due to me being British, like, yes, I'm British, our covers looked like this. In which, not to slander the artist, because this is better than anything I could ever draw, but I'll just say, I am not a fan of these covers. And looking at these covers, I kind of see why younger me never ended up reading them. Which makes me happy that the modern releases of Wings of Fire in the UK have the American covers, where the art is done by Joy Ang, I think? I'm probably mispronouncing the name, I'm sorry. But the artwork is beautiful. I love it. Which is why I traced it for this video. Because, as I mentioned earlier, I don't know how to draw. I can't draw to save my life. And I heard from a video that, ooh, tracing is a good way to start drawing. So that's exactly what I did. I traced the cover of the books because, A, I didn't really want to embarrass myself on my first proper video, and also to try and gain some resemblance of a understanding of how drawing works. And as for just the colourless outlines, you know what? I didn't do that bad, but it isn't that big of an achievement considering I was working off already previously made artwork. But I did make a few adjustments to suit my liking. I redid Clay's claws, I tried to make Sunny's skull more Nightwing-esque, and I made the eyes bigger because I just prefer things having bigger eyes in drawings. And that had the very funny side effect of having different emotions on different characters, like Glory looks horrified, and Starflight just looks really angry. And I did attempt doing colour. It did not go that well. I would burn this photo if I could. My ranking of Arc 1 is that at number 5, we have The Lost Heir. At number 4, we have The Dragonet of Destiny. At number 3, we have The Hidden Kingdom. At number 2, we have The Dark Secret. And at number 1, we have The Brightest Night. And as for characters, my favourite is Peril, my second favourite is Fawn, and my third is probably Deathbringer for now. But all of these are very much subject to change when I read Arc 2, which I haven't started yet as of me recording this, but by the time you lot are watching this video, I would have started Moon Rising by now. So yes, I am very excited to start reading Arc 2. I guess I'll keep you lot up to date with what I think of it. So yes, that's really all I have to say. So, I guess I'll see you another day. See ya. Wait, I've got one more thing to say.
You've reached your limit on talking. Shut the fuck up.